In my book, One Step Over the Line, Confessions of a Marijuana Mercenary, I go into the stories of my growing up in South Florida and the rest of my young friends I grew up with, and how we got involved with drug running. The stories go into the government's involvement in drugs and black and brown incarceration. But there's one chapter in this book where I go into racism and hate. It's chapter 10, and I'd like to read you a short synopsis. As a preface, I grew up in New Jersey, and as a 12-year-old kid living on a farm in New Jersey, we didn't see racism and hate. It was just a loving Norman Rockwell, 1960s upbringing. But in 1969, I moved to New Orleans, and here's my experience. The name of the chapter it's chapter 10. It's Spanish Fort, Man's Inhumanity to Man. Moving to New Orleans from New Jersey in 1969, I was exposed to something else the Old South had to offer. Along with its deep and dark veins of oil running beneath its Gulf waters was another commodity that flowed in the cracks and in a core: prejudice, hate, and words like It was February, and that meant it was Mardi Gras season in New Orleans. Eric, my brother, and I were allowed to go to one of the parades that night. He was about 11, I was about 13. So we get to the parade, and it's called the Zulu Parade. And this is a parade that's the oldest parade in Mardi Gras. And it was really set up for the blacks to carry the kerosene torches, the lighting. And I remember Mardi Gras goes back before basically electricity. And they would light the way for the carriages and the floats and the parades and the noble people or wealthy people that were involved in the parades. And we're sitting at this parade, and there's a young black mother with her roughly 10-year-old, similar to my brother's age, next to her. And the parade's in the streets. We're all on the sidewalks trying to catch the balloons and beads was what, the parade throws to the people on the street, and that's why we circle around. Everybody's excited. And then another woman, a white woman with a child about the same age, was sitting next to her, and they're both holding their kids in front of them as to protect them from the street in front of them. And the parade's kind of interesting. It's all black back then, and they're dressed up at that point in what looks like Ku Klux Klan outfits. I don't know why. I was 13 years old. I barely understood anyway. And they're spinning the kerosene torches, and they're lighting up the way. Excellent parade. If you go to New Orleans, the Zulu Parade is one of the better ones. And the young black kid, because remember, the parade's all at that point, now it's interracial, but then it was all blacks. Sorry, the young white kid turns to his mother and looks up and says, "Mom, look at all the niggers." And of course, the mother looks at her son and says, "What? We don't talk like that. Where did you learn to talk like that?" Knowing that the black woman with her young son of the same age is standing next to her. Now, I, as a 13-year-old, are just sitting back watching all this. And the kid looks up, "But Mom, you and Daddy say it all the time at the house." And the black woman looks at the white woman and just shakes her head like this. And I knew at that point how ironic that was, and how prejudiced and hate is fostered and nurtured. And it was just obvious. So, move forward. In the chapter, I talk about another couple stories. I was about 13 at the time, so a couple months later, my father had just died. My mother decides I'm going to have my first little boy-girl party. So she says to me and a couple friends to take on bicycles, gives us some money, run up to the corner and buy some chips and dip and sodas and bring it back so we can have the party. And right at the corner of my street, there's a park. It's just a little side of a levee where a fort was once, Spanish fort built in the 1700s. And it's been there. It's got a little plaque. Not much is left but the plaque and a couple bricks from the fort. But it's got beautiful oak trees with hanging moss. It's a nice place to sit and read, take a walk, have a picnic. So that day, there's half a dozen or so black couples, all dressed beautifully in the clothes of the 70s, and having a wonderful picnic. I remember sitting on my bicycle thinking, Wow, that is so cool. It looked like something out of a television commercial or a movie. I said to myself, when I grow up, and I date, I want to do something like that with girls and boys, have a picnic. And then my friends and I heard the sounds. Right around the corner from Spanish Fort, which is on Beauregard Street off of Robert E. Lee, is the beach, Pontchartrain Beach. And that's where beachgoers go on Saturdays and Sundays to, enjoy the lakefront. And it used to have another name, a name that was spoken under breath, called White Beach. And all of a sudden, about 150 whites come from around the corner. Young men, women, and they're carrying baseball bats, tire irons, chains, beer bottles, anything they could use as a weapon. And they rushed these poor kids, maybe in their young teens, late 20s, early 20s, sorry. And they just rushed them. And me and my friends watched in horror as they beat them with baseball bats, chains, tire irons, broke 20-ounce beer bottles over their heads. Women, people that could be your school teacher, beating up other women. A couple people ran and got away, but nobody could stop 150 people from beating up half a dozen, let's say. And the next day we heard that some people had died. And you know what? Go back and research the newspapers in New Orleans. There's not a single article about it. And many people that I know that lived in New Orleans, people older than me, when I tell them this story today, knew nothing of it. That's how racism starts, and that's its cause and effect. We saw also shortly after that a 20-foot cross burning in my front yard. Not for me, but just to let the blacks know to stay away from the beach. And then we have mass shooting, people killing people, people going into temples and killing Jews, people killing Hispanics in a Walmart. That's how racism is fostered, nurtured, and passed on from generation to generation. If you have an interest in reading that chapter or reading the book, it's on Amazon, Kindle, and I read the book myself on Audible. But this isn't about selling books. So anybody that wants the book can go to my website. It's called onestepovertheline.com. Check out the book on my website and put in promo code ONESTEP100. Again, the number 1 step and the number 100, and you'll get a free copy of either the Audible or digital. That's the deal. Thank you. All of a sudden, about 150 whites come from around the corner. Young men, women, and they're carrying baseball bats, tire irons, chains, beer bottles, anything they could use as a weapon. And they rushed these poor kids, maybe in their young teens, late 20s, early 20s, sorry. And they just rushed them. And me and my friends watched in horror as they beat them with baseball bats, chains, tire irons, broke 20-ounce beer bottles over their heads. Women, people that could be your school teacher, beating up other women. A couple people ran and got away, but nobody could stop 150 people from beating up half a dozen, let's say. And the next day we heard that some people had died. And you know what? Go back and research the newspapers in New Orleans. There's not a single article about it. And many people that I know that lived in New Orleans, people older than me, when I tell them this story today, knew nothing of it.